Welcome back to the verdict, and just examining the process, what happened, how do we improve upon it. Now we've got Professor Tahir Maman, OON, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He joins us from our studios in Abuja. Good day, Prof, and thank you for joining us today. Well, yes, we've been taking a look at some of the process in terms of what do we improve upon if we need to keep getting it better. You've seen, heard the results as well. You also weighed in time and again. But tell us this time, having listened to the complaints of some of the candidates, what do you think of the process?
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. I start by appreciating Nigerians, subject to the loss of lives here and there, very sad indeed. But this is the sixth election and transition we're having in Nigeria now since 1999. And with decreasing level of glitches, I think we are progressing actually. And I know we have a second segment of elections coming up in 2 weeks' time, but obviously the presidential election is the main thing. So for us to have been able to pull it through with minimum problems is something that we should be very happy and proud of as a country. Now, certainly there are a whole range of things which should be revisited soon after these elections. And in terms of the process, starting with, I believe, the number of parties, registration of parties, I think there seems to be consensus, across that we have too many parties and is causing more confusion actually than adding value to it. And if you look at the performances of the others, other than the two major ones, it's not anything to comment as a national on a national stage. At best, they should just be there as pressure groups, as local parties here and there. Some of them existed in the 60s, actually. So we need to examine that, whether they should indeed, in particular, be on the presidential ballot. There should be some serious conditions which the parties must meet to have their to be there on the presidential ballot. Then the primaries of parties, a lot of the problems that INEC had to grapple with came up through because of the acrimony and the rancorous nature of the primaries of parties, especially the big ones. And so the courts have done quite a lot in trying to sanitize that together with INEC itself. But there's still a lot of work to do there, because if we get the primaries right, it achieves so many things. One, it gives the citizens credible options, and then it will lead to good governance, because you now have people who really want to serve. Whereas we can see the effect of some of these rancorous primaries, especially with the National Assembly elections, where some of the people who are imposed on the electorate were rejected. And so that's a signal to parties to really sit up. But we can't leave it to them alone. And then the INEC itself, in terms of some of the logistics, we know the dynamics on ground can be problematic. They can have all the project management, all the logistics on ground in their offices. But once it goes to the field, some dynamics come in which are beyond their control or beyond the control of their officials.
Prof, let me jump in on this and just ask you,
for instance,
with respect to, pardon me, Prof, with respect to what you said about registration of political parties, in context of what the law says, and I cannot restrict them or from registering because they will rely on the Supreme Court judgment. Would you support we legislate saying, well, yes, you can be registered as a political party, but certain criteria have got to be met if you have to be registered? Or do we limit ourselves to a two-party system?
Well, we need a reform there. Any intervention can only come by law. And it's always better to have these things come up through in a very natural way rather than simply imposing on the country. As it is now, we really have two-party system in real terms. But what we can do is we can have the registration process open, but as I said, participation in certain levels should be regulated. For instance, if a party is going to be on the ballot, it should be able to show some visibility, some presence in states across the country. We know a lot of them manufacture data, information, as to their offices and all that. But you can now also bring in issues of money, or you can even say, okay, look, if a party is registered, it cannot participate. It can't present a candidate for presidency in the year that in the next election that it is registered. But it can participate in other levels for other positions, and then its performance in that particular election that will not determine whether meeting certain benchmarks, whether it's not strong enough to be able to present a presidential candidate. I've heard some people talking about depositing some money. I'm not too attracted to that idea because it will now make our elections sort of money. And people can borrow money. There are many ways people can beat that system. But I prefer a situation where a party is registered, but it will not be permitted to present a presidential candidate or even governorship candidate, actually, until one election after the election, the year that it was registered. In this way, it would have demonstrated its seriousness and availability, acceptance in the public domain, and so that our people are saved the trouble of what they're going through now in identifying candidates. As somebody was mentioned to me, apart from APC and PDP, probably the next party, there was a party that has is it PCP or something like that, that was able to gain some votes simply because it's next to PDP. So at the same time with APC, all the parties around them, although we saw from the data that actually ADC and APGA, the other parties which came after the big ones. So we need to amend this to regulate so that we don't overcrowd our voting system with parties which are not serious at all, which are more pressure groups.
Professor Maman, what, in your opinion, are the critical, outstanding issues that need urgent attention in our electoral process? The next election is not 2023. It's not even just the one, even beyond the 2 weeks, we have staggered elections here and there, and we usually have some of these issues as well. So what are those critical issues we need to urgently address?
Well, as I said, I just finished discussing parties because it is the foundation of all these things. Then secondly, INEC needs data to prepare. I've had people say, look, INEC has had 4 years. INEC doesn't have 4 years because a lot of information that it needs to work with are not within its control. It's information which are generated by the parties. So what it has to happen is that, like litigation, for instance, if every litigation should be concluded at least 1 month, if not 2 months, to the date fixed by INEC, for elections, so that it will have time to clear up all the logistics that it needs to have, and then voters' education. This is a long-term thing, but it's something that we cannot stop. It's something that has to be done continuously. And then the voters' registration must also be a continuous exercise. because we need to devise a means where you can just walk into any INEC office anytime and then do your registration without any hurdle. And then those who have the card already should be able to change it without too much protocol, because my understanding that is one of the factors which affected people's voting in this. A lot of people carry permanent voters' cards which they cannot use because they can't transfer it with ease. And you remember last time when this the election was postponed, and somebody has to go back to where he registered to vote. Now, if the process was fairly flexible and efficient, you go back within 1 week, you should be able to change your polling unit. You know, that makes it easy for voters to be able to vote. So it is creating an environment that will enable people to vote easily. And issues of security, you see, we are sort of between the deep sea and the devil, as it were. Like INEC imposed, working with the security agencies, that movements, placed a ban on movement between 6 to 6. I tell you, that affected enormously the ability of people to move around, because a lot of people don't have means of transport. And their venues, polling units are very far away from where they live. And so instead of going through, and then, of course, there are no commercial vehicles or whatever around. So instead, people just sat back at home. And these are things which have impacted on the voters' turnout in the elections.
Okay, Prof, let me bring you back here to the studios and talk to Professor Olurode. Now, with regards to there's so many political parties that we see, and some of the new entrants who are leading those political parties and have contested at the presidential level. One will look at their followership. That has been a major talking point. Their followership on social media, on Twitter, for example. Some of them have as much as 250 followers, 250,000 followers, and only to perform dismally at 20,000. Arguments have been that there are no polling booths on the internet, or should I say on social media. Where did they get it wrong? Because is it that their voter education was not sufficient or didn't penetrate enough? Or is it about the skepticism of following a new party, even though those bright minds that are young lead them?
The political party formation and identifying with a political party is not something that commences in a day and ends in a day. Look, the oldest political party in this country is the PDP since 1999. For whatever reasons, it has become a formidable institution. In 2013, 3 prominent political parties, CPC, AC then, and AMPP, merged together to become the APC. And nobody thought that the merger was going to work. In fact, people had given up that there will be infighting, they will fight, they will do this, but they've managed the crisis within the party. The question is, what is responsible for people taking their exits from very strong political parties, especially young people? Robert Michels talked about he who see political parties see oligarchy. Parties are run by barons, just very few people at the top of the hierarchy. I think if you want to stop proliferation of political parties, I think Nigerian political leaders should display more magnanimity in handling political parties' affairs, so that a number of disgruntled people within their own party will be able to be contained within the party instead of taking their exit to go and form political parties. From the smaller parties, they also have their challenges as well. When it comes to the primary, who will be the presidential candidate will be this. Because it's only when, you see, what are elections, what are political parties about? The role of any political party that is formed at all should have the objective of coming to power one day, not just for being referred to as a presidential candidate. because you have a set of policies that you want to see those policies implemented. And you can only do that through the instrumentality of your membership of your political parties. So if people don't belong to parties, if they are excluded from the internal dynamics of parties, then they want to take they don't feel comfortable because they don't have a say. And participation should be at that very level of political parties. And that is why in the First Republic, don't forget Action Group of this world, the NPC, the Northern People's Congress, NCNC. When I was doing some research in the 80s, I came across individuals who had their party cards, membership card. They were subscribing to political parties. They were making payments. And Nigerians still have that sense of volunteerism. They want to be seen to belong to parties, not to be lorded over by big political party financiers. Once that is done, and the political party managers, they are more effective in administering the party as an entity, creating a level playing ground for all. Why is it that people exit from parties? Because they thought they have been shortchanged. And it's not good for our democracy.
All right. I wonder how you view this, because when Chamberlain and Jide were analyzing some of those statistics that played out, we came up with, for the Northwest, 3.7 million margin for the APC and 1.9 million in the Northwest. In the Northeast. So I'm looking at these figures and wondering how it came about also from a different angle, because you know that traditionally the northern part of the country has cashed in on media, by radio, on their radios, on their watches. They all have this in the north. So penetration of awareness is very high in the north. It is unlike in the east or in the west, that predominantly would be the new social media, modern media, Twitter and Facebook, if you will. So is it possible that anybody who would stand to get presidency coming from the east, because the discussion has been that the next president in 2023 is expected to go to the east.
Does
that make sense to you? Does that make sense to you, since the ballot is king? Getting this kind of margins, 3.7, 1.9, will the East just be merely fantasizing about having a presidency in 2023?
Let me say this. Let me preface my contribution. When you look at the 2015 elections, and you are asked to do a kind of political economy analysis, which is what has unfolded even in this election. 2019 elections, you can say, is a class election. It's an expression of social divisions in this country. What do I mean? The personality of the incoming president again, Buhari, was a key factor. In terms of messianic appeal to the majority of the people in the Northwest. I'm not sure you can reproduce that. I'm not sure in this generation we'll be able to reproduce that kind of thing. They appeal to his person. Even some of the folks that he gathered in the Southeast, even in the Southwest, could be said to be because of his personality. And if you ask me, if Buhari had decided to come out alone, and some individuals in this election as well, which was very interesting, we've seen the scenarios that have been thrown up. Very interesting. Some people came into this election on their own personality, and they were able to make a point. They left their parties, and they were able to call the shots. So once you take Buhari out of this, I'm not sure you will have that kind of margin. This is very instructive as we move towards 2023.
Yes, but Prof, he'd always had that personality, but he never won the election.
All he needed was partnership. He needed partnership. He alone, you have analyzed this. In there were 16 states in the North, Buhari in 2011.
2011.
Yeah. Jonathan defeated Buhari by 10.5 million. In 2015, a more competitive election than what we had. You know, the introduction of the PVC was not until 2015. We used the temporary voter card for the election of 2011. So there were a lot of electoral frauds as would be expected, because in terms of names on the register, in terms of this, in terms of that. But when Jegas-led commission sanitized the register, some of these names were expunged from the register. And the margin of win came to just 2.5 in 2015. So all that was, what had helped is also the margin and being able to contain. You see, the support that they had in 20, you can see some of the people that matched with the parties that matched in 2015. Only the Southwest could be said to have been able to keep their wards. In most of the other states, some of the states have gone back, except probably Kwara State.
We'll come back and look at this. There are some other very interesting angles that we need to bring up, but that's when we return from the break. Stay with us.